everybody. Thank you for joining us for this talk on parenting, specifically geared towards age group from 0. I never really understood that 0 thing, but a couple of months to 5 and so on. As you move along, though, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything on cleanup on any age, I'll do my best to try and help you. If I don't have an answer, I'll just make one up, so don't worry. Rabbi Ronnie Greenwald, that's out. He ran Camp Sternberg for 40, maybe 50 years. Brilliant. He used to say, kids come in different shapes and sizes, right? You've got your triangle, like cookies, he would say, like cookies, triangle, circle, square, and tough. And tough cookies, he would say, needs their own sort of special attention. And there are different temperaments, different types of personalities. And just in the time that we have, I sort of condensed it to sort of streamline the ones that might cause us the greatest friction and learn how we can best navigate our relationship with the child that might be a little bit more of a challenge. Because quite frankly, if all of your children were just, amazingly calm and cool, you wouldn't be sitting here, you'd be somewhere else. So, we're going to talk about 3 major personality types, and again, this is by no means definitive, and as we move along, if you say, oh, you know what about this, what about that, again, feel free to fire away. Anything is not clear, ask any question, I don't mind being interrupted. We're going to talk about the stubborn child, not yours, but the neighbor's. We're going to talk about the anxious child, and we're going to talk about the shy child. When we talk about personalities, it's interesting. People very often say, oh, my child's personality is this or that. Personalities actually, practically speaking, don't emerge until we call the tween years, 12 and 13, 14. There's temperaments. So you can certainly see a child has a predisposition, is leaning toward a certain temperament. But the personality itself encompasses much more than the temperament. The personality is sort of like, our personality is an interface. For example, let's say that your temperament is by nature, you are just a very shy, introverted person, right? That is your temperament, and growing up, it's likely that trajectory would continue. But let's say, however, that at some point you developed sort of a theatrical bent, or you sort of got into things that are more creative or artistic and so on, and you need to come out of your shell. You might very well develop or don a more extroverted personality, even though your temperament itself may be shy. So when you see a child, and I'm thinking, by the way, I have a relative, I'm not going to say who, my sister-in-law, who, it's amazing. She is absolutely lovely. Engaging, she is, at the top in what she does, and she is very chit-chatty. She was a selective mute for an entire year. They thought that she was just going to be one of those whatever, and she has certainly an advanced degree, and she is top of the field at what she does, and highly interactive, chatty, and sociable, a clear extrovert, so much so that, she, has a magnetic personality. So, and by no way can we assume that a child who has a certain temperament now is going to develop on that trajectory regardless. There are some deviations, people go in different directions, and certainly if the child leans more towards being anxious or shy, introverted, there's no reason to think that this is the personality that's going to develop. There are many things we can do, and that's what I'd like to speak about, is about what we can do to maximize that child's sort of temperament and optimize our relationship with the child. One of the biggest questions people have, and one of the biggest areas I think that we sometimes get it wrong, is in dealing with children who are similar or dissimilar to us, and what the pitfalls can be, and what the advantages can be. So, by a show of hands, by the way, who thinks, generally speaking, in broad strokes, if you have a child who's similar to you, that you're probably the best one to sort of engage and interact, rather than your spouse who may not really get the child, who thinks that similarities are going to work best? Okay? And who thinks that if the child is too similar to you, you're going to be the worst parent to parent? Raise your hand. Okay, different people, that's good. And it seems pretty mixed. And the truth is, it works like this. I don't have a PowerPoint here, but well, I've got it here. So for those of you that don't have 20 eyesight, here's the thing. The 4 sort of quadrants. You ever hear the idea, by the way, that if the only reason you get upset with somebody else if they have a, if it brings up something in yourself that you don't like? You ever hear people say that? Right? That's not true. What is true is that you get bothered by somebody else if they have a trait that you have in yourself that you don't accept. For example, if I have an alcohol problem, if I had an alcohol problem, I hope this is not edited poorly. And like everyone coming. Okay, if I have an alcohol problem and I don't acknowledge or accept it, and I meet somebody that has a problem drinking, I may very well have a hard time connecting with that person and find something just very offensive without being able to put my finger on it. Or if I had a problem with being late, or a problem with being messy, whatever it is, and I see somebody and I have that problem, but I don't really own and accept it and acknowledge it within myself, I'm not going to connect well with that person, because they're going to be a mirror. They're going to remind me of traits within myself that I don't like. And we don't like mirrors when they're held up to us if we don't accept it. However, if this person has a trait, has a characteristic, has a temperament, has something within themselves that I have, I went through it, I own it, I know what it's like to be in that position, not only do I connect, but I have empathy. I fully understand where this person is coming from, and I connect at a very, very high level. So it's not about whether you share the trait with your child, it's whether or not you accept it within yourself. So if you've got somebody, for example, who may be a little bit, I'm thinking of all the people that I see, and I'm just hesitant to sort of, people go, hey, you outed me, even though you don't know what I'm talking about. But whatever it is, whatever the trait is, if you really own it within yourself, you have nothing but love and empathy that your child is the same type. And you'd be the best person for it. So again, if you have it, you see it and accept it, and your child has it, that's good. If you don't see it, don't accept it in yourself, and your child has it, that's bad. You're not the optimum parent to parent. We'll have to work on yourself to deal with that trait, and let your Rebbitzin or the Rav take care of that. If you don't have it and you accept it in your child, also great. If you don't have it, meaning you're not similar, and you don't accept it in your child, you're also not the best one. I say the best one, don't put them up to typhus, meaning that your spouse is probably the best one to handle it. The reason is like this. Even if you don't have the trait yourself, if you can't understand, for example, maybe your child is the opposite. So you are always neat, you're organized, you're on time, and you walk into your child's room and you just can't open it because it's full of everything that gets in the way. You just can't understand it, and you don't accept it. You're not going to be the best one to deal with the child on those types of issues. I just like to take a step back and appreciate temperament and look at the larger picture here. We all come into the world with a tikkun, a rectification, a fixing of the neshama. That's why we're here. Our tikkun is synchronized to our mazel and temperament, meaning we are going to come into this world with a certain disposition, be it emotional, mental, physical, certain spiritual characteristics, certain makeup, that is going to allow for us to optimize our ability to fulfill our tikkun. Right? Mazel is sort of like it's harmonized, it's synchronized to the tikkun. Meaning that this is who your child is. So do more than just accept. People always talk about, I accept my child. Do more than that. Whatever your child has is the reason why they're here. Whatever you have is the reason why you're here. So don't just accept it, embrace it. More than embrace it, celebrate it. Imagine if you really celebrated your child's stuff. I know somebody whose child has a learning disability. I guess many of us know people with children learning, maybe we have ourselves. And she's so good with it, so okay with it. And by the way, forget about that. You have a child who's a poor speller. Child comes back and you just can't understand it because you're a great speller. Spelling came easy for you, but your child comes back spelling things completely. Every time that child brings back a test and you're not willing to accept that she or he is just a bad speller, it's going to be a reason for annoyance, for frustration, for consternation, for just being upset and frustrated that this child is not fulfilling the reality that you want. because you just don't get how he or she can do X, Y, Z. It doesn't make sense that you should be sloppy when I'm neat. It doesn't make sense you should be a bad speller when I'm a good speller. So when you have a child who is just different from you, if you're able to really not accept, embrace, but celebrate this child, then it's perfect. But again, going back to the beginning, if this child is very similar to you with a certain trait or characteristic that you have that you don't own, you don't accept it within yourself, you don't really, and how do you know if you accept it, by the way? How do you know if you accept something within yourself? What happens when somebody says something, they criticize something about you?
You don't get frustrated.
Good, very good. You don't get frustrated within yourself. Somebody brings it up, you don't put up your ego, your shield, and run the other way. You go metaphorically, maybe literally, face forward. You say, yes, this is me. This is my issue. There's nothing, fewer things, by the way, more powerful for our emotional health, for ourselves and our relationship with our children, than acceptance. Simply accepting the reality that is. Okay. Any questions, by the way? Anything not clear? Good? Yes, please.
You were talking about negative things. How about when your child has positive traits? How is that?
Wait a minute. There are children with positive traits? I'm sorry. So what's the question?
And how does that work with whether the kid has positive traits and you're similar, not similar?
Yeah, great. It's a good question. The question is whether the child has positive traits and whether it's similar or not similar. Look, I'm certainly not a cause for friction. If it's something that we ourselves take pride or take pleasure in, it certainly is a source for that with our child. And if not, we can certainly appreciate it. But the issues really come up is when it is a trait, again, within the child that is not so positive, that we don't fully accept. But I don't think the positive aspects are going to be the course of the path to too much friction. The cause, I don't know why I can't do it, but cause of friction. Okay. Now, I'd like to share with you the following, and I got permission from my son to relate this story, because this happened 2 Shabbosim ago, a week from this Shabbos. And it goes to the foundation of our relationships with our children. We all have in my house Shabbos opportunities. Some people call them Shabbos jobs, we call them Shabbos opportunities, because it's an opportunity to get ready for Shabbos. I've got pre-Shabbos opportunities, and post-Shabbos opportunities. And it's clearly listed age appropriate. The 4.5-year-old's job is to look cute. That's his job. Coincidentally, it's mine, but I don't seem to fulfill mine, but my child is his. Everyone's got their own jobs. So my newly minted teenage son decides on Shabbos, again last Friday night, after the Suda, his job is to clear the table. Not to put stuff away in the kitchen, because if you've had a teenage boy that puts stuff away into the refrigerator, it's just like you open it up and it's, yeah. So his job is simply to clear the table. And he announced, as we're just sort of sitting in the living room, having benched, whatever, he says, he's going on strike. He's going to strike. I said, why are you going on strike, sweetheart? He goes, job's unfair. I said, okay. Didn't make a big deal, didn't argue, didn't say anything, not a single word. This could have unfolded 1,000 different ways, 1,000 different times. So, I just continue to interact. Your child does something, by the way, at any age. You don't become hostile to the child because they won't do what you want. He asked the question, I answered him. I said, I was going to the kitchen, he wants something to drink. Just be pleasant. Just because your child does something you don't like doesn't mean you become hostile. And then I waited about, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. The little kids going to bed. And I went upstairs to the room and I said, sweetheart, I said the following sentence. And after I said the following to him, I don't know, at some point, maybe 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, he went downstairs, didn't say anything to me, not only cleaned up the table, the kitchen, put out the cereal for the little kids the next day, did everything under the sun, b'simcha. Okay, because by the way, as we all know, had I forced him to do it, and I could have, there would have been a lot of stomping, a lot of stuff spilled, very just, not done pleasantly, but he would have done it, because he's, Baruch Hashem, a good kid, but simply was on strike. I said the following to him. And the ikr, the crux of this, plays out whether the child is 2 years old, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years old, 100 years, doesn't make a difference. I said, sweetheart, you're such a, and everything I said to him, by the way, is the emes. You know, parents are so consumed with what they say to their child, they're always looking for that perfectly crafted phrase. Think, what do I say to my child? Forget what you say. More important than what you say to your child is what you think about your child. Okay? Just understand, what you think about your child is everything. Forget about the words. So I said to him, sweetheart, I said, you're such a great kid. I would be the biggest fool of a parent if I made a big deal about this. And I was very concrete. I said, before Shabbos, you helped out with this. And he did a lot of stuff. He gave a bath to his little brother. He did this, he did all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. He did this stuff. It is a drop in the ocean, the fact that you don't clear the table. As a matter of fact, I happen to think you're right. The Shabbos jobs do need adjusting, but that's not the point. He said, then why is it a drop even? I said, because your father asked you to do something. And the fact you didn't do it, it makes it a drop in the ocean. But it's still a singular drop in an ocean of everything that you do, all the amazing things. And I listed through, you know, and if you have to stretch. If you have to say, you know what, you didn't bite anyone today, or you get up to school on this, whatever they get right, you go ahead and you just talk about it. I said, for me to make a big deal about this, it would just be so silly. I want you to know, and he said, then he said, well, now I'm just going to veer because I'm not listening to you. I said, no, you know what, I'm making you putter, you're exempt. As a matter of fact, I don't want you to clear the table. I said, if you choose to, it's only because you want to. And by the way, this is not some kids you can't do this with, and be like, they'll roll their eyes. This was, and he's one of those kids, except for the fact I was being completely honest with him. This was not fake. I said to him, don't clear the table. I said, if it causes you that much pain, it's a table. It's not the end of the world. My wife happened to be away, that's why. But it's not the end of the world. And I didn't know whether I would end up cleaning. I didn't know. But the truth is, it's not the end of the world. That's what I said, gave him a kiss, hug, whatever. I don't know, at some point, whatever. The entire kitchen, and done quietly, you know, b'simcha, and again, the cereal was out for little kids, done beautifully. And by the way, postscript, this past Shabbos, table is, you know, what the table is after Shabbos. And I just said to him, I said, casually, I said, sweetheart, are you still on strike, or are we good with the kitchen? He goes, no, I'm okay with the kitchen. And that was it. Now, what was the most important thing for me to do in that situation before I said and did anything? Take my ego out of the way. If you take your ego out, what's the big deal about a table not being cleared? Nothing. This child will go on Mitzvah Shem just fine without a table being cleared. I told him to clear the table. How dare he not listen to me? I'm his father. The ego takes over. The table has to be cleared. If he doesn't listen to me here, what's the next thing? Maybe he'll just say I won't go to school. Maybe this, and this. All the fears takes over. The anxiety takes over. The anger takes over. If my ego would have gotten involved at any age, at any point with that child, again, at any point, it would have been all downhill. I took my ego out of it. I said, what's the best thing in the situation? And then I looked at the situation objectively. I said, what's the reality? You know what? He's a good kid, and it's not the end of the world. I was in an elevator on a Pesach program, and people always say, you know, because I talk about chinuch and, you know, relationships, and they say, no one wants to sit at my table because they think that their kids have to be like perfect. I go, try being me going 8 days without screaming at your own kids. You know, it's not very easy. So we're in the elevator, and this kid is maybe 2 years old, tantrum, melting down, loud screaming, and this elevator is, you know, going nowhere fast. And it's crowded, and the mother is just calmly just there. Everyone's getting off, this and that. I said, look, I got to ask you. I said, you know, you handled yourself amazing. You didn't get upset. You didn't get whatever. I go, just do me a favor. Just tell me what's your secret when your child is throwing a tantrum in the middle of a crowded elevator. She goes, oh, it's so simple, Dr. Lieberman. I pretend like it's someone else's child. But in doing so, she took her ego out of the way. It wasn't about her. It wasn't her child not listening. So, when you're dealing with a tough cookie, or a stubborn child, a sensitive child, if you go to war, you'll lose every time. Every single time you'll lose. You will lose, you will lose. By the way, a lot of stuff applies to spouses as well. You will lose every time. You will lose, lose, lose. There is no getting this child. We all know children. They're digging the hills and deeper. The child will never say, gee, you know what, Mom, you're right. Ever. You know what, Dad? Tati, no. Never go to war. Ever. You'll lose. It's all about the relationship. Meaning that if there is an issue, never, ever, ever bring it up in front of anyone else. This is true for all spouses, for your spouse, for your children, for everyone, particularly with some children. Because can you imagine, by the way, a very sensitive child being called out? If you were called out in the middle of a meeting, or the middle of a conversation, or the middle of something, in front of other people, With children, it's equally so, but somehow parents get into the heads that it's okay to criticize and point out something a child is doing because it's just family around, just the siblings around. It doesn't make a difference. Quietly take the child out. Quietly. Not a big deal. It doesn't have to be right then. You don't have to make a big deal about it. Trust me, if you forget about it, it wasn't a big deal anyway. And then when you see the child, privately, quietly talk to him. You'll get nowhere in public. It is something that parents continually do just because it occurs to us and it's easier, but it's a mistake time and again.
What about positive pressure?
Pardon me, please?
What about positive pressure?
What do you mean by that?
When it's in public. Like the pressure of it. Look what everyone's not doing, you know? You're talking about not talking about it in public.
I'm talking about not critiquing the child in public.
There's never a gain in it? Like, there's no...
Well, is there ever a gain in it? Well, if it's going to cause the child any sort of embarrassment, I'd be hard-pressed to see how it's going to offset any gain. You're right, you may correct the child's behavior, but I think you would have injured the relationship in the process, and also injured or eroded his ability, her ability to trust you, that you're not going to be a safe sort of, it's not going to be a safe conversation. If he acts out, he can be called out on it. I know it's not a big deal for some people, particularly those of us that may be tough-skinned. You have people that will say to you, just give it to me straight. By the way, half of them are lying, just so you know. And the other half would even prefer sugar-coated. So by children, we have to appreciate their interface is visceral. There's not a lot of filtering or buffering or padding there. So any time that you call a child out, you point something out, even if they adjust their behavior, there's not some sort of residual impact. Okay? Very good question. Yes, please, sir.
Going back to what you were saying about the childhood story, but how do you now curb fit that for the right child? Because my son, for example, he's already an adult, he's 22, but if I would do that with him, then he would just play a game. Well, today, it's no big deal if I only did this. The next day, he's taking the car and doing things.
100%.
Hey, I'm not on drugs. I'm not a gangster.
That's right.
All I did is take the car for a little
Good,
bit.
100%. Good, very good. The very good question is, look, with going back to the example with a child who you say, what's not in the world, that what if it's like a slippery slope? Understand something. A child that acts out, a child that does something that's inappropriate, if you have a relationship with that child that is, we'll call it near perfect or ideal, that child is going to keep his behavior, her behavior in check, irrespective of what they're inclined to do. There are some things children do to spite the parents, meaning that it's going to cause them pain. Those are things you want to eliminate. So I don't think by telling the child that they don't have to do something that they're supposed to do because in the scheme of things and so on. This doesn't give them carte blanche. And you raise a nice point. This doesn't mean they excuse every behavior. And by the way, how you do it is all the difference. And he also knows, by the way, if I told him to do it, he would have to do it. It wasn't like I felt like he wasn't going to do it anyway, so might as well do this. If your child believes that you don't have the authority to be able to do it, then then he's in charge. You already have a problem. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with let me just cover, because this leads us into sort of like the 5 points that just generally speaking, in every relationship with your child, these are the things to do regardless of the personality types. Number 1 is this. Ignore what you can ignore. Once again, same thing by Shalom Bayes. Could you have done something smarter, easier, faster, cheaper than your child? Could they would have done it exactly the right way? Are they doing something you don't love? Maybe yes, maybe no. Ignore what you can ignore. You don't have to call your child out on everything. The job of a parent is not to point out everything the child is doing wrong and correct them. Your child comes back with a spelling test of 20 words. A grade of a 98. I'm trying to think really fast. That's why I went into psychology. Well, how many words is wrong is that, by the way? 1 word?
Yeah,
1 word? Okay.
but only partially.
Only partially. Oh yeah. By the way, here in Lakewood, it's great. You can't get less than 110, and that's if you fail miserably. By the way, because it's like the kid comes back, it's like 140. And irony, it was a math test on percentiles. I was like, this is great. So now your child comes back with 100. It's like 100. You didn't study for this test. I didn't. It's like, oh, it's amazing. Anyway, child comes back literally. Let's make it easy for me, please. Comes back with a spelling test with 10 words on it. 1 is wrong. What's the first question parents reflexively ask? What'd you get wrong? Well, how nice is that? Imagine preparing a nice supper for your husband, imagine doing something nice for your wife, and they go ahead and point out the one thing that you messed up on. Child goes back with a spelling test, look it over, regardless of what they got. If they come back with a 30, let's look at what you got right. Let's look at what did work. So, just ignore what you can ignore. Next, put any child in a merry-go-round. 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. What does a child do every time they go around? What do they do?
Wave, yeah.
They wave. You ever see it right? What did you say? That's okay. No, you get. What's your answer? It's no wrong answer.
If they go around, they make mess.
Oh, they make a mess.
Depends what your age.
Oh, but maybe it's age. Okay, fine. Oh, yeah. I guess the child is pretty scared to be in the merry-go-round. I'd suggest maybe not putting him on the merry-go-round anymore. But
Carousel?
the carousel. Yeah, that's right. Is that what it's called? Merry-go-round? Yeah, my days. Yeah, okay. Child waves. What does a parent invariably do every time? Why? Where's wave?
Positive reinforcement.
Yes, good. And also even, perhaps just another level, is connection. I truly believe so many parenting issues can be solved, resolved, and mitigated if parents just focused on enjoying their children, connecting with your child. Really just enjoying your child, connecting with your child. Is there anyone here, by the way, you don't have to raise your hand if you relish a snow day? Really? Your children are all grown, are they? No. You do. Right. Snow days are great. It's an excuse. I don't have to, go in and I just, it's just fun. But I get, by the way, why it could be, it could be a lot. We were at someone's house for Shabbos, my family and their family. This woman was going on and on and on about this awful experience she had. It was a snow day. She said she was trapped in the house. She couldn't get anything done. And I'm looking over at her kids and my kids, and she's going on and on about how her day was shot. It was ruined because the kids were home. And I just look over at my wife, and she's like, David, don't say anything. And I was being good for a while. And then she goes on, she goes, you know what? When the kids go on the school bus in the morning, my day begins. When the kids come home, my day is, she goes like, ruined! I'm like, are you 18? Like from the valley? And I look over at my wife again, she's like, this is why people don't invite us back. Don't say anything. You have to enjoy your children. Enjoy your children. Again, we talked about more important than what you say, what you think about your child. For the tough ones, by the way, think about, have a picture when they were born, when they were little, when they looked cute. Yeah? And have that in mind when you talk to your child. You'll have a different relationship with the child, different conversation. They can sense when you're looking at them with sort of this chas v'shalom, but almost contempt. Like, you know what? You're not what I ordered. Have in mind when your child was conducting him or herself in a way that, because that's, by the way, what the ego is. A child comes into the world, they do nothing productive for us. They make waste, they spit up, they cry, they keep us up, and we love them. They can do nothing wrong. As they get older, what bothers us when they don't listen? Our expectations change. We now expect something from them, and when they don't deliver, our ego gets involved. Take your ego out, and it's dealing with a different relationship. Rabbi Dessler, that's once said, in Sheva Brachos, he says, when expectation begins, love departs. Again, same thing here. When you have expectations about your child, and the child doesn't live up to them, you can't but find yourself frustrated. If the child's capacity doesn't exceed your expectations, you're going to find yourself continually annoyed and frustrated. So remove the expectations. Okay, we're going to continue with other things to do, generally speaking, and then we're going to get into anxious children, deal with shy children. But first, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Ready, Set, Grow for sponsoring this event. They happen to, one of the reasons why I love Ready, Set, Grow, and forgive this, this segue, is because